Hey guys, tonight we're walking through the winding, sun-baked alleys of ancient Babylon, where the smell of wet clay and dust hangs in the thick air, and the cries of distant merchants echo off mud brick walls. You find yourself drifting toward the temple district, where rooftops are lined with solemn figures in linen robes, their eyes locked onto the sky as if it just whispered a secret. These are not astronomers, not exactly. They're priestly weather watchers, and they take their jobs extremely seriously. Because up here in this ancient city between the Tigris and Euphrates, a few angry clouds can mean divine judgment, crop failure, or just a grumpy king with wet sandals. It's early morning. The sky is a sheet of pale pink, streaked with lazy cirrus clouds. A breeze tiptoes through the streets, nudging dust along like a whisper. The priests murmur among themselves, pointing at different corners of the sky, as if trying to find a bad mood hidden behind the sunrise. You hear one of them mutter something about a tooth-shaped shadow on the horizon, which may or may not mean hailstorm. You're not sure if the clouds are angry or if the priests are just bored. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, if you're still awake, post your location and local time. I love seeing how far we travel together every night. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift deeper into the temple courtyard, where pigeons flutter lazily across the open sky. The priests step aside as you pass, too absorbed in the cloud formations to notice your presence. One of them's hunched over a small altar, staring into a bowl of water like it might ripple out tomorrow's forecast. Another one keeps looking west, muttering about a break in the wind line, which sounds dramatic, but probably just means a hot afternoon. It doesn't take long before you're led to the ziggurat, the massive layered temple pyramid that defines the city's skyline. The stone steps stretch dizzyingly into the sky, each level a different station for different priestly duties. You're escorted by a solemn young apprentice who clearly thinks his job is way more important than it probably is. He explains with all the enthusiasm of a teenager forced to give a book report that the rooftop is the best place to observe divine meteorology. You reach the top platform and take in the view. Babylon stretches like a dream below you. The rivers glint in the morning sun, winding lazily through reed beds and garden plots. But your guide insists you look up, not out. Apparently the real drama is above. That right there, he says, pointing at a vaguely duck-shaped cloud formation, means shifting winds. Probably from the north. Might bring dryness. You squint. It honestly looks like a spilled smoothie. You try not to laugh, but he's deadly serious. Weather in ancient Babylon isn't just about staying dry or planning a picnic, it's life or death. A sudden flood can wipe out crops. A drought can turn a fertile season into a famine. And worst of all, a failed forecast might mean the gods are displeased with you. And trust me, you don't want to be on the God-a-dad's bad side. He's the storm guy, total drama king. You step aside as a procession of priests arrives, one of them holding a scroll in both hands, like it's made of glass. The wind tugs at their robes as they form a semicircle facing the horizon. They chant softly, their voices weaving in and out like the breeze. It's not really about the words, though. You get the sense it's more about showing the sky that you're paying attention. Like, hey, weather, we see you. Please don't kill our barley. One priest points out a shadow crawling along the southern sky. Possible dust storm, he whispers. or the god Ea turning in his sleep. Historians still argue whether these metaphors were poetic guesswork or actually meant something predictive. But when every cloud is a mood swing from a celestial being, it's no wonder people were on edge. A gentle horn sounds from the lower level, and the priests begin to descend. The official cloud watch is over. Apparently there's a more precise method coming up next. You follow the procession back down the stairs, your legs already wondering why anyone builds so many steps without an elevator. As you return to the dusty temple courtyard, the air feels heavier. It might be the humidity, or it might be the collective anxiety of a dozen men who believe the sky is a divine mood ring. There's a sheep waiting in the courtyard now. It's chewing cud, completely unaware that it's about to become the day's Doppler radar. You glance toward the high priest, who has emerged from his quarters with a solemn face and arms tucked into his robe like he's trying not to touch anything. He doesn't speak. He just nods once, and the apprentice beside him tightens his grip on the animal's lead. And here's your gentle reminder. If you thought this whole thing was going to be cloud watching and stargazing, you're in for a surprise. Babylonian weather forecasts are about to get weird and just a bit meaty. The sheep is led away the priest, following with steady steps. You trail behind, wondering what on earth or what in the heavens you just signed up for. Somewhere overhead, the sky is still calm, but down here in this strange sacred city, the real forecast is about to be carved from flesh. The sheep is not thrilled. You can tell by the way it hesitates, bracing its stubby legs against the dusty temple floor as the apprentice coaxes it along. The priest, tall, balding, smelling faintly of frankincense and overwhelming responsibility, walks behind, like this is a procession, not just a glorified weather report. You follow, half curious, half horrified, trying to pretend you're totally used to predicting cloud cover based on internal organs. You're led through a low archway into a shaded chamber that smells like wet earth-dried blood and burnt offerings, an oddly nostalgic scent if you've ever spent time in a butcher shop attached to a church. Inside the walls are decorated with carved diagrams of livers, yes, actual diagrams, etched meticulously into clay tablets. Each one is labeled with cryptic notes in cuneiform: Quadrant 7, sudden frost, indentation near left lobe. A dad displeased. It's basically a meteorologist's Pinterest board, but for divinely inspired entrail reading. The sheep is laid gently on an altar that glistens with old oil and ceremonial polish. There's no audience, no bloodthirsty crowd. This is not a sacrifice meant to entertain. This is a solemn act, a sacred ritual. The animal is calm, surprisingly, perhaps lulled by the murmuring chant of the assistant priest, or perhaps resigned to being the day's biological barometer. With a steady hand and a disturbingly sharp obsidian blade, the head priest begins. You turn your eyes away just slightly, watching instead the way the other priests prepare. One rolls out a clay tablet, another dips a stylus in soft wax, ready to take notes as if the sheep might start dictating. And in a way it will. When the procedure is done, they focus entirely on the liver. It's cradled like a newborn, held up to the light, filtering through narrow slits in the temple walls. The organ glistens darkly, its slick surface reflecting torchlight as the priest rotates it slowly. You half expect it to start glowing. Here's the thing: the liver was considered the seat of life in Babylonian thought. If the gods wanted to send a message, this was their canvas. The priest murmurs terms that sound like battlefield tactics, line of incision, outer curvature, storm, crease. You try not to think about your own liver doing any of those things. The clay model comes out next. Yes, a model, there's a liver replica, hand-molded in clay, designed to map out zones and quadrants. Think of it like a GPS, if GPS units were based on cow organs. The priest places the real liver beside the clay one, and the apprentice begins matching up features. A ridge here, a dent there. See, he says to no one in particular the gall pocket is flattened. That always means gusty winds. Always. Naturally, it's part anatomy, part poetry, part cosmic guesswork. One priest insists that a dark patch near the bile duct means moisture is coming. Another disagrees, claiming it's a blessing of dryness. The high priest silences them both with a grunt and traces a finger across a vein. This, he says, gravely aligns with the wind path. You stifle a yawn, not from boredom, oddly enough, but from the strange calm in the room. There's something hypnotic about watching adults argue seriously over liver wrinkles as if they were royal decrees. You shift your weight and glance at the apprentice who leans in to whisper, "They once forecast a locust swarm from a notch right there." He points to a spot the size of a sesame seed, and it was almost right. Almost, you ask. Well, it was just flies. But still a lot of them. The priests reach a consensus. The liver has spoken. The stylus scratches into clay as they record their interpretation: mild winds, possible mist by dawn, and a faint warning of drought. You wonder if they ever write chants of thunderstorms, unless Inanna's in a good mood, but apparently the phrasing stays formal. These records will be archived, stacked in darkened vaults beneath the temple for future reference or divine audit. Historians still argue whether this liver reading system was genuinely predictive or simply a ritualized form of statistical projection disguised as theology. But to the Babylonians, it didn't matter. What counted was that someone tried to understand the chaos of weather, that someone had the courage or perhaps the nerve to look at a sheep's liver and say, "Yep, definitely fog at sunrise." You're invited to look closer. The liver has cooled slightly, its surface firm, but strangely intricate, like a topographic map of secrets. The priest points out a vein that curves like a river delta. This, he says, flows with wind from the west. You nod solemnly as if that makes perfect sense. Inside, your modern mind is screaming. This is completely made up. But your body is already easing into the rhythm of this slow, ancient logic. You blink, you breathe in the warm, faintly musky air. You begin to believe just for a moment that you too can tell the weather from the slick whisper of liver. As the priests wrap the organ in linen for ceremonial burial, because, yes, even livers get a respectful send-off, you step outside. The sky hasn't changed much. Still pale, still bright, still holding back whatever mood it's planning to unleash. But now it feels decipherable, as if a secret has been half revealed and you're just waiting for the punchline. You pause in the courtyard, squinting at a passing cloud. It looks like a boot, or maybe a sandal. Could mean wind, could mean nothing. Either way, the sheep has spoken. You linger by the doorway. As the last priest leaves the liver chamber, the scent of incense still thick in the air, clinging to the sandstone like old gossip. The courtyard feels brighter now, though the sun hasn't moved much. Maybe it's just your eyes adjusting, or maybe there's something comforting in knowing that someone somewhere thinks they've just read tomorrow's weather in a sheep's guts. You're invited well more like gently nudged into the temple's records room. It's cooler here, buried halfway underground, and lined with shelves sagging under the weight of clay tablets. This is where the real magic happens: interpretation, transcription, and most importantly, preservation. Because it's not enough to guess the weather. You have to document your guess in painfully detailed cuneiform. A scribe greets you, his hands permanently dusted in clay, and soot his robe speckled with signs of a career spent arguing with wet dirt. He gestures toward a central table where a large model of a sheep's liver is laid out. Unlike the clay one used during the ritual, this model is beautifully sculpted, complete with painted veins, raised lumps, and carefully etched quadrants labeled with deeply evocative names like Storm Crescent Fertile Fold and Wound of the West. You're handed a stylus. It's not sharp, more like a stick that's seen too many Mondays. The scribe eyes twinkling with the faint madness of someone who's been reading liver data for 30 years encourages you to have a go. You kneel by a fresh clay tablet and attempt to copy the raised lines from the model. It's harder than it looks. Your stylus sinks unevenly, forming blobs instead of symbols. The scribe peers over your shoulder and mutters, "Might want to avoid recording that. Could accidentally summon a frost demon." You both laugh. You hope he's joking. As you work, the scribe explains how each part of the liver corresponds to different forces: fertility, windstorm; divine blessing, drought. He shows you a diagram where the left lobe is shaded darker. This part deals with chaotic weather, especially when it sags or shows discoloration. Apparently, a misshapen right lobe once triggered a 3-day panic about incoming firestorms. Spoiler, it was just a very dry week. Still, the records remain. Every prediction is carved into clay, baked in the sun, and filed carefully away. You're handed one of the older tablets, its edges crumbling slightly. On it is an account from nearly a century earlier: liver smooth and free of blemish. Wind signs soft. Stars favor west. Wheat is safe. A dad is merciful. It reads like a very passive-aggressive weather app notification. And yet there's poetry in it. Even the language has a softness to it, like everyone's trying to make the divine feel just a little more predictable. The scribe pulls another tablet, this one with rougher etching. It reads, "Black patch near the gall. Storm in 3 days. Behold, the clouds will eat the sun." Dramatic. And probably wrong, but who's checking? Historians still argue whether these liver readings were truly influential or just formal rituals used to stall for time while the actual weather did whatever it wanted. Some believe the priests believed it deeply. Others think it was a performance, a kind of civic theater wrapped in entrails. Either way, the records don't lie. Someone wrote it down, and that means someone cared. As you return your clay tablet to the table, you catch a glimpse of a pile of discarded ones. "Botched interpretations," the scribe mutters, shaking his head. One of them claimed a lopsided liver meant a wind from the underworld. The harvest failed that year. Coincidence? He doesn't wait for your answer. To lighten the mood, he shows you a scroll of old jokes carved on a wall nearby. Yes, really. One reads, "A priest who reads wind from a kidney will find himself soaked before dawn." Another, "Don't trust a sheep that smiles. You smile." Clay-based dad jokes from 3,000 years ago. Humanity's finest tradition. The scribe walks you to the back of the room where larger, more elaborate tablets are displayed. These were used for teaching. You spot diagrams with hundreds of tiny dots and arrows pointing in every direction like a liver-themed subway map. This one, he says, is the master tablet. Only the high priest can read it without falling asleep. You try to decipher it. There's a section labeled Vein of Thunder and another called Lobe of Sudden Fog. You ask what that one predicts. The scribe shrugs. Usually just fog, or a very disappointing sunrise. You're handed a wax copy of a modern-day reading to compare, modern in this case meaning only 20 years old. It's impressively boring. No firestorms, no frog-based omens. Just outer curve, smooth, inner vein, calm. Expect mild rain near evening. Livestock should be sheltered. Honestly, if you got that in your weather app today, you'd feel smug. You step back into the sun eyes blinking at the light. The wind has picked up slightly, rustling the palms that line the temple wall. You glance skyward, wondering what the liver would say now. Somewhere inside, another sheep waits. Another priest prepares. Another tablet will be filled. And you feel oddly centered. Predicting the future may be nonsense, but trying is very human, even if it involves sheep. You wander away from the records chamber, following the gentle slope of a ramp that curls around the temple's outer edge. The stone under your sandals is warm, now kissed by the midday sun. Somewhere nearby, someone's grinding barley. You can hear the steady rhythm of stone against stone, like a heartbeat softened by centuries. A breeze stirs the hem of your tunic, and for a moment it's easy to forget that your day began with a sheep liver being interpreted like celestial scripture. But Babylon doesn't rest for long. Another group of priests passes by, robes fluttering as they head toward an elevated terrace. You decide to follow. The higher you climb, the more of the city you see, the labyrinth of canals snaking between neighborhoods, the hanging gardens peeking out from noble courtyards, and always that immense sky above it all. And today the sky is being interpreted. You arrive at what can only be described as the cloud platform. Several priests are already gathered, squinting into the horizon, murmuring observations with the gravity of philosophers and the tone of people who haven't slept in 36 hours. One priest gestures to a distant smear of gray. See that that's a finger of a dad. He's either pointing or poking. Another nods solemnly or scratching. The clouds drift lazily over the city shapes, folding and unfolding like gossip, pass between bored gods. One lumpy formation looks suspiciously like a goat. Another could be a chariot. If you squint and tilt your head sideways, you point to a darker patch forming near the western skyline and ask, half serious, "What's that mean?" A nearby priest, whose beard is practically braided from stress, glances at it and mutters that that's a blob of unrest. You wait for elaboration. None comes. The priests bring out a bronze disc with spokes, etched into its surface a kind of wind rose. They hold it up, squinting through the spokes as they align it with the cloud patterns. You're told this helps them determine celestial symmetry. You're also told not to laugh. Apparently, if the blob-shaped cloud lines up with the third spoke from the left and a bird flies east within the hour, it means a dry spell. Unless it's Thursday. You lean on the stone balustrade, half listening, half lulled by the warm breeze and the hypnotic way the clouds shift shapes. The conversation among the priests grows more animated. One insists that the recent double curve in the sky portends hail. Another says it just means Adad is rolling over in his sleep. Historians still argue whether these interpretations were coded seasonal cues or just desperate ways to explain why it's suddenly raining inside your wheat silo. Eventually, a priest offers you a clay tablet with a weather symbol key. It's not as helpful as you'd hoped. The symbols are less sun with cloud and more liver with lumpy bits. You ask what a series of 4 wavy lines means. He pauses. Either high wind or the gods are playing harps again. You're not sure what kind of forecast that is, but it sounds dramatic. As if to prove a point, thunder rumbles faintly in the distance. The priests fall into a reverent silence. One of them raises a bronze bowl and listens. Yes, listens. To thunder. As though it's trying to tell him whether to wear sandals or bring a cloak. You resist the urge to make a sarcastic comment. Everyone here takes thunder very personally. You're reminded of a tale the scribe mentioned earlier, a storm blamed on a poorly timed sheep reading. Supposedly, the priest in charge missed a blemish on the liver's left flank, leading the king to host a feast under open skies. Guests were drenched, tables were overturned, and the priest. He was reassigned to latrine purification duty, a position so cursed it's never mentioned again in any surviving records. Still, this mix of anxious cloud reading and spiritual panic has its charm. You're beginning to see the logic, or at least the comfort, in pretending that the sky is full of hints, clues, and celestial sarcasm. Better than randomness, better than waking up to find your village underwater, with no warning besides a cranky frog croaking at dawn. A pigeon lands near your feet. It looks around unimpressed by the humans trying to outguess nature. One of the priests chuckles and says, "Sometimes the birds know better." He tosses a crumb and adds, "And they don't need livers." The mood lightens. Another priest begins a lively retelling of a time clouds shaped like a fish were interpreted as great harvest only to coincide with a worm infestation. "We should have known," he says, shaking his head. The fish was upside down. Classic mistake. You feel the sun shift behind a thin veil of clouds. The sky is subtly darkening, as if preparing for its own grand entrance. You look up and see the ominous blob, again fatter now, trailing a gray tail like smoke. You point. Is that still unrest? The priest frowns. Now it's a sulk. You don't press. One priest begins sketching the cloud positions onto a wax tablet. His strokes are slow, careful, reverent, as though each swirl might hold the future. When he's done, he compares it to a similar sketch from last week. See, he says same formation. Last time it rained. Another priest peers over. But last time we also sacrificed 2 geese, and the temple cat ran into the river. You nod politely, deciding not to ask how the cat's behavior fits into the forecast. They continue debating as the clouds drift and fade. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warm wind pass over your face. Somewhere below, children are laughing in the streets. A temple bell tolls gently in the distance, and up here on a rooftop full of anxious meteorological mystics, someone scribbles a final note into clay blob thickening. Mood uncertain. You descend the temple terrace feeling strangely informed, as though you've just passed a meteorology exam in another universe, one where clouds have feelings and sheep organs whisper secrets. The priests stay behind, still discussing whether a particularly stubborn blob could be hiding lightning in its belly. You, on the other hand, are headed to meet someone with a more practical bent, the scribe. His office is tucked behind the main temple wall, a modest chamber filled with soft light and the sweet dry scent of sunbaked clay. He doesn't look up when you enter. His stylus is mid-groove, carving steady lines into a fresh tablet. You pause to watch. There's something mesmerizing about it, the slow, methodical press, the faint scrape, the way each symbol stacks like a puzzle piece into meaning, or assumed meaning. possibly wishful thinking depending on how today's weather goes. He finally glances up, gives you a nod that might mean, welcome, or please don't ask me to read anything out loud, and gestures to a wide bench. You sit slowly careful, not to jostle the shelves of neatly stacked tablets beside you. They look heavy, solid, permanent. I hope you're not expecting parchment, the scribe mutters dryly. That's for dreamers. Clay's honest. You smile. It's the kind of room where time slows down and your heartbeat syncs with the ticking of a dripping water jug in the corner. The scribe resumes his work but speaks as he goes. We write it all down, he says, not looking up. Every cloud shape, every gust of wind, every sheep that's ever been slightly lopsided. You glance at a nearby tablet, half curious. It reads, left lobe sharp, gall clear, stars unseen, wind smells of metal, proceed with irrigation. You ask if that last bit, wind smells of metal, is metaphorical. The scribe snorts. You ever stood outside after lightning smells like metal, tastes like coins? It's not poetry, that's a warning. You hum thoughtfully, wondering if lightning and copper taste tests are on the Babylonian curriculum. Apparently they are. As he finishes his current tablet and sets it aside to dry, he pulls out something unexpected, a copy of the old forecasts, compiled over decades, maybe centuries. It's not just a logbook, it's the Babylonian version of a weather archive, crossed with a diary, written entirely in earnest and slightly anxious clay. One passage reads, rain predicted from Adad's breath, stars aligned with Mila Shutu, sheep liver was agreeable, king ordered a second feast. You're beginning to see how this works. The gods whisper through sheep, the sheep respond in organs, the priests interpret the organs, the scribes document the interpretations, and the king decides whether or not to cancel his birthday party. Meteorology meet politics. The scribe taps a particular tablet with his stylus. This one, he says, with the weariness of a man who's seen too much, claimed a thunderstorm would strike on a day that turned out dry as a camel's elbow. Do you know how many complaints I had to record from farmers that week? You shake your head, he continues. 14. 2 threatened to feed their sheep to the scribes. You wonder if this is a common threat. The scribe shrugs like it is. Then he hands you a tablet to try. Your turn, he says. The clay is surprisingly soft. Your hand trembles slightly as you press the stylus into its surface. It's harder than it looks. The symbols aren't letters, they're thoughts compressed into geometry. You make something that looks vaguely like a lightning bolt or maybe a fork. The scribe leans over, squints, and says, that's thunder or cutlery. Depends on context. You both laugh. It echoes off the walls like a soft drum beat. To lighten the moment further, the scribe pulls out a collection of alternative forecasts. These are the fringe cases, wild predictions, baffling symbols, and in one memorable instance, a sheep liver that resembled the Babylonian god Marduk's foot. We never did figure that one out, he mutters. The liver, not the god. Another tablet tells of a sheep whose liver was missing a section altogether. Panic ensued. Adad has withdrawn his favor, someone shouted. Turns out it was just a young sheep, still growing. Forecast overreaction. Historians still debate whether liver-based forecasting was truly an attempt at science or just ceremonial pageantry. But the records are undeniable. These people wrote everything down. If a pigeon flew west on a Tuesday during a solar eclipse while a priest sneezed, guess what tablet? And they kept it. As you continue experimenting with your own clumsy clay symbols, the scribe chuckles and hands you a finished piece to admire. It's a forecast from a particularly dramatic season. Fissures in liver. Thunder from northern gods. Uruk sent barley tribute. Flood avoided. You ask if they really believed barley could change the weather. The scribe raises an eyebrow. Can you prove it? Didn't touche. As you prepare to leave the scribe waves, you off with a sleepy smile. Weather changes. People panic. Clay endures. Write it down even if it's wrong. You step outside into the late afternoon warmth, blinking against the light. A breeze lifts the edge of your sleeve. Somewhere in the distance, a faint rumble rolls across the sky, maybe thunder, maybe just the city exhaling. You glance up, no clouds, no sheep, just wind and clay, and the quiet satisfaction of being slightly more prepared for the next drizzle. You're making your way along the outer walls of the temple complex, now following the gentle curve of the perimeter, like a lazy river of sandstone and shadow. The city hums softly beyond vendors calling children, splashing water in shallow gutters, and distant flutes floating on the breeze like memories you didn't know you had. But here in the sacred district, the tone is different. Slower, heavier, the kind of place where even the air seems to walk on tiptoe. You arrive at a small staircase carved right into the wall, narrow and uneven, clearly not made for comfort. An apprentice gestures for you to ascend. The high chamber, he says. His tone is reverent, but also a little weary, like he sent too many wide-eyed visitors to meet a man who hasn't smiled since the last eclipse. You climb. The chamber is not grand. It's quiet, dim, filled with the faint glow of oil lamps and the constant flicker of flame on stone. Sitting cross-legged in the center, surrounded by cushions and scrolls, is the high priest of weather divination. He doesn't look up at first. His hands are deep in a wooden box filled with liver models, clay bone, even one carved from polished cedar. You almost want to ask if he's building a collection or just very picky about forecasts. Finally, he speaks. I saw mist this morning, he says, without preamble. A thin line above the ziggurat, the kind that means indecision. You blink. Indecision from whom he shrugs eyes, still fixed on the liver in his hand. The gods? The sky? Me? It doesn't matter, he gestures for you to sit. You do careful not to knock over a nearby bowl of burnt herbs. The room smells like memory and maybe regret. On the floor beside him lies today's liver, already dried, already red, already archived in his mind, like an uncomfortable dream. He walks you through the markings again, but this time it feels different. Less theatrical, more personal. See this ridge, he says, tracing it with a finger. Storm line. It's raised today, but yesterday it sagged. Does that mean the storm is coming or just changing its mind? He sighs, sets the liver down. We're supposed to know, he mutters. But some days, I think we're just guessing with better costumes. You don't answer. You don't need to. Outside thunder rumbles faintly like a god clearing his throat. The high priest barely reacts. If it rains, we're right. If it doesn't, we interpret again. The truth, he says, has flexibility. He opens a scroll, worn at the edges, faintly singed. It lists the last 10 readings. 9 were wrong. The 10th, he says, proudly, predicted a sandstorm within a half-day's margin. You ask if that made him happy. Terrified, he replies, because then the king thinks we always know. And the gods, they don't like confidence. You glance at the walls covered in diagrams and star maps, liver zones, wind tunnels, even one dramatic mural depicting Adad himself descending from a cloud with a fistful of thunder and what appears to be a very fashionable cape. No matter how advanced the temple seems, it's all built on uncertainty and nerves. The high priest begins to pace. You see this city, this temple, they think we control something. That the gods whisper to us through sheep guts and cloud smears. But sometimes when the liver is too smooth, too perfect, that's when I worry. Why, you ask? Because then the sky is hiding. He pulls open a cabinet and reveals an old, cracked tablet, its surface warped by heat. This one predicted nothing. Said the weather would be uneventful, calm. We all relaxed. 3 days later, half the barley fields were underwater. He pauses. Nah, I've never slept right since. Historians still debate whether priests like him were cynical manipulators or sincere believers caught in a cycle of divine anxiety. Either way, you get the sense that this man wants to believe, needs to, but has also lived long enough to know the difference between reverence and randomness. You ask if he's ever ignored a reading. Once he admits. And I buried it. Burned the tablet. Told the king it was inconclusive. 2 hours later, a freak dust storm tore through the temple. Took the library roof. I haven't skipped a reading since. He gives you a long look, then smiles for the first time. It's the kind of smile you only get from someone who's been scared by the sky. I like you, he says. You're curious? Not many are. You ask what today's reading said truthfully. He glances at the liver. Possible floods, possible drought, or nothing. Depends how you read the gall ridge. He sighs, then adds with a chuckle. I told the king to bring both sandals and a cloak. You both sit in silence for a moment, listening to the breeze rattle the hanging charms by the doorway. A string of bronze discs clinks softly like a distant wind chime in a quiet storm. The high priest stretches slowly, like someone who carries too many seasons in his spine. You can't beat the weather, he says, but you can try to out-negotiate it. Outside, the sky is graying just slightly. Not enough to panic, just enough to wonder. You thank him. He nods, then waves you off. Go, he says. Watch the sky. Let it lie to you a little. You step out of the chamber and into the breeze, not sure if you feel more confident or less. The air smells of wet stone now. Or maybe that's just your imagination. Either way, the gods are in a mood. The temple steps feel steeper on the way down. Or maybe it's just the weight of everything you've heard. You pass acolytes whispering in corridors, priests muttering into scrolls, and one unfortunate boy holding what appears to be a bag of feathers with a suspicious look on his face. The deeper you go, the more you sense it weather. Here isn't just a forecast, it's a feeling. A nervous, sacred tension that threads through every corridor like humidity before a storm. You round a corner and find yourself in a vaulted chamber, lit entirely by flickering torches and a single shaft of sunlight that filters in through a high slit in the stone. A group of robed priests is seated in a semicircle around a storyteller, well, technically another priest, but one who clearly enjoys his job a little too much. He holds a scroll in one hand and waves the other dramatically in the air, as if trying to conduct the thunder itself. You slip in quietly, unnoticed, just in time. And the frog, great and bloated, did sneeze. He declares, eyes wide, voice low, and from that sneeze did come the sign, a wet wind that carried locusts over the barley fields. And lo, the priest knew not what to do, for the liver that morning had lied gasps, genuine ones. The storyteller grins, clearly pleased with his dramatic pause. You try not to chuckle, but you're immediately captivated. His scroll is a collection of weather disasters, some real, some exaggerated, to the point of myth, all blamed on the gods' shifting moods. But here's the fun part. They all start with some bizarre natural omen. A hiccuping donkey, a crack in a wall that smelled like garlic, a sheep that sneezed in the wrong direction. And so he continues. The king summoned the liver watchers and declared, "If the gall turns black by morning, I shall cancel the festival." But the gall remained pink. The festival began, and what came rain. Buckets of it soaked his crown clean off. They say it drifted down the canal for 3 days. Someone giggles, even you. And just like that, the room changes. The fear dissolves. There's laughter here. Warmth. These priests aren't just sacred interpreters. They're human, exhausted, full of stories and slightly irrational fear. Weather isn't always about reverence. Sometimes it's just absurdity wrapped in incense. The storyteller finishes the scroll and folds it neatly. Another priest steps forward with a new one, but before he can start, a younger initiate pipes up from the back. What about the one with the frog that caused a hailstorm? The room erupts into low chuckles. That wasn't a frog, someone corrects. That was the goat who sneezed so hard it scared the birds into flying east. More laughter. And yet beneath it all, you feel something poignant. These stories, wild, hilarious, a little ridiculous, are still rooted in the deep, gnawing fear that no one really knows what's coming. So we tell stories, we make sense of randomness, we find humor in it, because if you can't laugh at a sneezing frog predicting agricultural collapse, what's the point? One of the elders quiets the room and unrolls a fresh scroll. His tone is more somber now. The day the sun went dark, he begins. And just like that, the laughter hushes. Even the torches seem to dim. It's a story of a solar eclipse, rare, terrifying, and completely misinterpreted by the liver that morning. The priests thought the gods were content. The sky said otherwise. The city fell into chaos for 3 days. Livestock scattered. Crops were trampled. One man apparently ran into the river and refused to come out until the moon apologized. You're told the eclipse eventually passed, as they do, and the priests composed an emergency scroll called Protocol for Sudden Sky Hunger. No one took it seriously until the next eclipse. Historians still argue whether these events were exaggerated for effect or genuinely feared as divine punishment. But in Babylon, the line between fear and storytelling is beautifully blurry. The sky misbehaves and the people make meaning. Or try to. The storyteller closes the scroll and bows his head. The group murmurs, thanks not just to him, but to the sky, the gods, and perhaps even the frog. You rise slowly and slip out of the room, the story swirling in your mind like wind over water. Outside, the sun peeks through a patchwork of clouds. You hear a bird cry short and sharp, then silence. For a moment you wonder if that means something. Rain a blessing. Or maybe the bird just needed attention. The breeze picks up. You keep walking. A priest passes you muttering into a scroll. You catch the words, omen east wind, and slightly irritated sheep. You nod respectfully, as though that combination of words is entirely logical. You reach a quiet courtyard where a handful of young initiates are sketching cloud shapes on wax tablets. One of them points and says, "That one looks like a dad's sandal." The other replies, "Or a fish." You smile. Either way, someone's writing it down. You're barely a few steps into the next courtyard when you're struck figuratively, not literally, by a feather. It flutters past your face like a sleepy butterfly and lands on the dusty stone beside your sandal. You look up to find a small group of priests standing in a loose circle, eyes fixed on the sky, releasing feather after feather from clay bowls held at chest height. You inch closer because, honestly, at this point, if someone told you this was the Babylonian equivalent of a windsock, you'd believe them. And you'd be right. This is the art of wind divination. The lead priest, a dignified man whose beard has clearly been styled for both wisdom and aerodynamic efficiency, nods politely in your direction and waves you into the circle. Another priest hands you a bowl of pigeon feathers, light as air and still faintly warm, like they remember flight. Hold it like this, he instructs, raising the bowl to eye level. And wait. You do. A moment passes, then another. Finally, the wind stirs soft and deliberate. A single feather rises, twirls gently, and floats away toward the northeast. The priests murmur. One scribbles something quickly onto a wax tablet. You raise an eyebrow. So that means... The bearded one nods sagely. Possibly hail. You glance at the soft, lazy sky. Hail, really? He sees your skepticism and continues. Or possibly a dry breeze carrying mountain spirits. Depends on humidity and whether we had lentils for breakfast. You smile. It's the first fully absurd thing anyone said today without trying to sound mysterious. He picks up a second feather and drops it. This one flutters westward. He says, frowning. Conflict. Between what you ask. He waves vaguely. Air, gods, people, all of it. Or just an afternoon squabble between a dad and Ishtar. Either way, wind's picking up. It's worth noting Babylonian wind observation wasn't just guesswork. Over time they had noticed patterns. Hot wind from the east often did bring dryness. Cool air from the north sometimes arrived with thunderstorms. But everything had to be filtered through the language of myth. The wind wasn't just a thing, it was someone. And it had moods. You're led to a bench beneath an open pergola where the wind rustles reeds strung like wind chimes. Each direction has its own set. North gives a deep clatter. South hums like a broken flute. East buzzes faintly like distant bees. And west is always late. One priest explains the system like a scholar, with too many opinions and too few listeners. You see, he says, pointing with a stick to a drawing on the ground, wind moves in cycles. From the gods through the stars across the fields, each gust has a fingerprint. He draws a spiral which looks suspiciously like a snail. You nod anyway. He continues. Last week, a triple feather westward drift meant three things. Illness in cattle, bad grain fermentation, and the return of frogs. The frogs again, you ask? He nods. Always the frogs. Another priest, younger and more skeptical, interrupts. Or maybe the frogs just like puddles. The older one scowls. You doubt the feathers, the younger shrugs. I just think the gods are probably busy with more important things. There's a tense silence, and then the breeze shifts again. A feather flips dramatically and floats directly upward before falling at your feet. The circle leans in. The older priest gasps, a swirl. He looks to the sky. Someone is making a decision. You glance up, half expecting a bolt of lightning or at least a goose. Nothing. Just clouds playing a slow game of chess with the sunlight. Historians still debate whether this level of feather-based analysis was serious or symbolic, but the records exist. There are entire tablets describing wind changes before major floods or invasions. Was it correlation, coincidence? Or were the priests just really good at post-event storytelling? You're handed a stylus and asked to record your own interpretation of the most recent feather flight. You pause. The clay feels smooth, freshly shaped. You write feather rose danced fell straight. Air uncertain. Gods possibly napping. The older priest reads it, nods gravely, and says, "You have talent. You won't let it go to your head." After the ceremony ends, the feathers are collected and placed into a reed basket. Not reused, no, these have served their divine purpose. Tomorrow there will be new feathers, new gusts, new half-explanations for things no one can truly predict. As the group disperses, you sit for a moment beneath the pergola watching the reeds flutter. You can feel the wind shifting slightly, brushing your skin with the soft insistence of a god. Trying not to be too obvious. It's gentle, but you get the message things are changing. Whether or not that means a drizzle, an argument, or a full-blown sandstorm, well, depends which way the next feather falls. You glance at your feet and see one last feather. You pick it up, let it rest on your palm. It doesn't move. Dead calm. You look at the priest. He smiles. That he says means you should probably take a nap. The idea of a nap is tempting, but instead, you find yourself walking slowly. Now the kind of stroll you take when the world's a little too strange to rush through. The sun is mellowing into its afternoon glow, casting a golden warmth over the smooth temple walls and turning the city's skyline into a jagged silhouette of rooftops and smoke wisps. You follow a quiet path that curves toward the outer edges of the temple complex. The crowd's thin here, and soon it's just you and the sound of soft sandals on stone. Then as you round a corner, you step onto a wide platform surrounded by astronomers, Babylon's other weather watchers. Only these ones prefer stars to livers. They barely notice you. Their two focused brows, furrowed charts, unrolled fingers pointing skyward, though the sun hasn't even set yet. One of them mumbles Jupiter's slightly off course. Again, might mean dryness. Another replies, or someone just rubbed the chart too hard. You ease closer and peer over the shoulder of a young woman adjusting a bronze disc covered in notches and tiny carvings. It looks like something between a dinner plate and a very confused compass. "Star measurer," she says, noticing your curiosity. Aligns the constellations to the horizon. See that dent there? That's where Venus gets cranky. You nod, because of course Venus gets cranky. She shifts the disk, aligning it with the faint edge of the moon that's just peeking out above the rooftops. The moment it clicks into place, she makes a note on her wax tablet, moon sharp. Sky clear, mild air, dreams should be favorable. You blink, dreams, she grins. You think this is just about rain. These dreams are weather too just. The soul's kind. And just like that, you're pulled into a whole new layer of Babylonian forecasting. The astronomers here don't just track stars. They record how dreams shift with weather, how certain winds make people sleep deeper, how planetary alignments coincide with wheat growing faster or babies being born breach. There's a scroll being passed around that shows a list of night star patterns with annotations like good for childbirth, bad for goat herders, and avoid winemaking at all costs. You point to a particularly complex constellation, a swirling pattern of lines that looks more like a spilled basket of lentils than a map of the heavens. "What's that one?" A quiet voice beside you replies, "That's the Eye of Ea." You turn. It's an older astronomer, his robe patched and sun-faded. He speaks slowly, as if each word is a little heavy with memory. They say if it shines too bright before dawn, storms come fast and cruel. But if it blinks just once, you'll get heat followed by calm, and then bees. You pause. Bees. He shrugs. It's the eye. It sees what it wants. Historians still argue whether Babylonian astronomy was genuinely tied to weather forecasting, or if the overlap was more metaphorical. But the line blurs quickly here. In Babylon, everything meant something. Every flicker of the sky, every breeze, every shadow stretching across the ziggurat at dusk. You lie back on a warm slab of stone and let your eyes follow the slow unfurling of twilight. A few stars blink into existence, quiet and patient. The astronomers murmur around you, voices rising and falling, like a lullaby of equations and prophecy. One of them lights a brazier, and its smoke coils upward in little gray ghosts. Someone throws in crushed rosemary, and the scent wraps around your senses like a warm thought. It's peaceful here, almost sacred, but not in the stern, liver-sacrificing way. This is the gentle kind of reverence, the kind where you look up and say, "Hey, sky, we're listening." You close your eyes, and the voices melt into the background. She says Mercury is smiling again. Only when it's Tuesday. What if it rains tonight? Then the moon lied again. You let their words drift over you, half asleep, half awake. In this moment, Babylon feels like a place, suspended in time, where science and myth sleep side by side, holding hands under the stars. A light breeze brushes your face cooler now. Someone tosses a pinch of barley into the fire, a small offering. A thank you perhaps for a clear sky, or a bribe. You never really know with the gods. You sit up slowly, blinking as the last light of day fades behind the ziggurat spires. The stars are clearer now, sharp points of silver strewn across indigo velvet. The astronomers are taking final notes. You hear someone whisper, "North is humming. There will be wind by midnight." You don't ask how they know. You just nod, grateful for the certainty, however invented. As you rise, someone offers you a tiny bronze charm shaped like a crescent moon. "For luck," she says, or possibly accurate humidity. You accept it with a smile. As you walk away, the sound of a flute begins somewhere in the courtyard, soft, wavering like a lullaby for the city itself. And above the stars, blink lazily, watching Babylon dream. The flute fades behind you as you move toward a narrower alley within the temple grounds, your sandals brushing against scattered petals from an earlier ceremony, though what it was celebrating no one seems entirely sure. You wander until you're intercepted gently but firmly by a wide-eyed apprentice. He's perhaps 15, trying hard to look serious and only partially succeeding. "You're wanted," he says, as if it's both an honor and a mild inconvenience for the story. You're not sure what that means, but at this point you've followed livers, feathers, clouds, and constellations. You're committed. He leads you past sleeping dogs, half-sung chants, and a vendor who seems to be selling tiny charms shaped like weather symbols. You don't ask what the one shaped like a sideways onion is for. Eventually you're brought into a modest chamber brighter than the others, with polished floors and a semicircle of listeners gathered around an older priest who by all accounts looks like he's been waiting his whole life to talk. "You," he says, pointing to you with dramatic flourish, "are just in time to hear the most accurate forecast ever recorded." You raise an eyebrow. The room hushes. Not the most dramatic mind. He clarifies just the one-time liver reading wind patterns, cloud shape and celestial placement all lined up, and poof, the forecast came true. You take a seat. He clears his throat. It was the 29th day of Ululu, he begins, when the air itself tasted like chalk and the pigeons refused to land. Strong opening. He gestures for emphasis. A sheep was brought forth, healthy, round, perfectly pink liver. But there he holds up his palm as if conjuring at a blemish, a perfect oval on the left quadrant. Gasps from the audience. That oval, he says, lowering his voice, matched a diagram last seen generations earlier, etched into a clay model we'd kept beneath the temple, half buried in dust. You lean in. The liver was interpreted to mean one thing and one thing only: an unbearable heat wave. Not warmth, not discomfort. Unbearable, the priest says with a nod. Even the gods were said to be fanning themselves. The signs piled up. A northern wind curled eastward. The water in the ritual bowls evaporated before noon. A boy burned his hand on a sun-warmed brick. A heron fainted mid-flight. And yes, the clouds that morning allegedly resembled a sunken fire pit. Whatever that means. The priest took the findings to the king. And what did the king do, you ask? The room waits. He panicked, the priest says flatly. Ordered fans distributed across the palace. Tripled the city's water ration. Had ice carried from the northern mountains. You didn't even know they had ice. And then the priest says the heat came. It lasted 7 days. 7 blinding, sticky, sand-baked days. The streets emptied. The canals boiled with frogs. The wheat curled like burnt scrolls. But he adds with a wink, we were prepared. He holds up a small clay tablet. This was the forecast. We made copies. Even sent one to Ur. They sent back barley, which melted. Laughter. But then he turns serious. It was the one time everything matched. The sky, the signs, the sheep. The gods didn't even argue. We read their message clearly, and for once they didn't whisper, they shouted. He pauses, staring out the window, where the sky is just starting to darken, with the promise of night. Historians debate whether the signs truly predicted the heat, he admits. Some say it was luck. Others say we saw what we wanted to see. But he holds up the tablet. This still says, fire in the air. And that week it felt like the sun came down to visit. He passes the tablet around. When it reaches you, you trace the etchings lightly. They're not just data, they're a story. A breath of fear and preparation carved into clay by hands that had never seen a thermometer. As the tablet makes its way back to him, he chuckles. The irony, of course, he says, is that we didn't predict the festival after. You tilt your head. The rain, he says. The very next week, so much rain. Flooded half the city. No one saw it coming. Not even the moon. He leans back smiling like a man who's made peace with uncertainty. That's the way of it, he says. Get one forecast right and the sky humbles you with the next. The listeners slowly disperse, murmuring to one another about that week of impossible heat, their footsteps echoing softly off the polished floor. You stay behind a moment longer, watching the priest carefully rewrap the clay tablet in a strip of linen as though it might catch a chill. He looks at you. Don't try to beat the sky, he says softly now. Just try to understand when it's in a talking mood. Outside, the wind has changed. You don't need feathers or livers to feel it, just your skin now tingling slightly with cool air. It's subtle, quiet, like the world inhaling slowly. After a long laugh, you step out into the growing dusk, and for once the forecast doesn't matter. You wander into the outer corridors again, your thoughts sticky with clay tablets and sunburnt prophecies. The air has taken on that strange, in-between feeling, still warm from the day, but with a gentle edge of night creeping in like the first brushstroke of a shadow on the wall. As you reach a shaded plaza lined with fig trees and cracked benches, someone calls out from under a canopy. It's a young priest, half draped in a ceremonial robe that looks 2 sizes too big. He waves enthusiastically, beckoning you toward what appears to be a schoolroom. The floor is packed earth, and the walls are decorated with painted diagrams of livers, wind charts, and a surprisingly dramatic depiction of a sheep standing on a mountain with a lightning bolt behind it. You suspect artistic liberties were taken. Welcome to the Diviner's Apprenticeship Hall, the priest says proudly, where we learn to make educated guesses with extreme confidence. You step inside, ducking beneath a low lintel adorned with crude drawings of storm clouds and birds. Several younger students are huddled over wax tablets, furiously copying symbols, while a stern instructor strolls among them, muttering things like, "No, that's a joy fold, not a shadow crease. And if you confuse the bile twist with the rainfall notch again, you'll summon a plague." You're handed a wax tablet and a stylus. Try to find the drought pattern, the apprentice says, gesturing to a practice liver molded from soft clay. It's covered in markings, dots, grooves, ridges, and something that looks suspiciously like a thumbprint. Probably not divine. You squint. Is this one? The apprentice peeks over your shoulder. That's actually a delayed wind spiral. But don't worry, everyone gets that wrong their first few weeks. You sit beside a slightly disheveled student who's rubbing his temple and muttering, "I should have studied astronomy." He glances at your tablet. "You're doing better than I did," he says. "My last test, I thought a gallbladder bump meant sandstorm. It was indigestion." You chuckle. The instructor announces a quiz, and chaos erupts. Students scramble for styluses, whispering things like, "Remember wet lines." Curved dry lines crack, and if the outer ridge is too smooth, it's either a blessing or someone oiled the model again. The test involves examining a mock liver, drawing your interpretation, and then explaining it aloud with as much gravitas as you can fake. One student stands and declares confidently, "There will be mild rain, followed by the birth of twins in the barley district." Why, the instructor asks. The bile pocket looks hopeful. A pause. "I'll allow it." You don't know if this is education or stand-up comedy, but either way it's highly entertaining. Your turn arrives. You squint at the clay liver, pick a faint crease near the base, and announce wind from the southeast. Possibly fish-related. The instructor peers at your tablet, then nods. You may be the only honest one here. He claps his hands, ending the session. The students groan with relief, stretching and laughing as the tension lifts. One student accidentally drops his clay model, and it breaks clean in half. Everyone gasps. "Uh-oh," someone whispers. Omen of division. The instructor sighs. "It's an omen of clumsy fingers. Clean it up." You help gather the broken pieces, and as you do, the apprentice leans in and says, "You should have seen last week. Someone used a real liver for practice. Forgot to refrigerate it. Smelled like divine punishment for days." Historians still debate how rigorous these training programs were. Some think the priests memorized complex anatomical systems and tracked weather for years before making predictions. Others think it was more about theatrics and ritual, get the signs roughly right, speak confidently, and wear enough incense to cover the guesswork. You're starting to believe both theories are true. Outside, twilight is deepening. The instructor pulls a curtain over the diagrams as the students file out, chattering about their scores and joking about who accidentally forecasted a thunderclap with their elbow. As you step back into the plaza, the apprentice sighs beside you. "Sometimes I wonder if we're actually learning the language of the gods, or just getting really good at pretending we understand sheep." You consider this, then reply, "Maybe both." He grins. You coming to the feather reading later, he asks. Or are you more of a stargazer? You shrug. I follow the wind. Good answer, he says. Just don't let it follow you back. The wind here holds grudges. You walk off into the soft evening stars beginning to blink above like slowly opening eyes. Somewhere nearby, a small chorus is rehearsing for tomorrow's rain ritual. The voices rise gently into the dark, tuneless and sincere. And behind you, in a room full of hopeful students, someone is still trying to remember which crease means clouds, shaped like regret. You're drifting now, not just physically, but mentally too. Babylon has worked its strange magic on you. Between the liver charts, pigeon feathers, and moon-blinking constellations, your brain is softening like warm wax. You follow the smell of incense and firewood down a stone corridor until it opens into a courtyard that's somehow both quiet and completely full of noise. To your left, drums, to your right, bells, and dead center, a group of people dancing in the slow, deliberate way that makes you think they're either summoning rain or deeply committed to interpretive movement. You ease toward the edge of the gathering. No one stops you. No one even seems to notice. The rhythm is hypnotic, slow footfall, sway, pause, clap. Then again, like thunder that's forgotten how to rush. You catch a priest in mid-sway and ask, "Is this a ritual?" He doesn't break stride. "It's a rain request," he says, or a very hopeful piece of theater. The dancers move in a circle around a central bowl of water and crushed figs, which you're told is symbolic of the sky's generosity. Or it might just be snack leftovers. The symbolism around here is flexible. A chorus begins, just 3 voices low, and humming the words, old and rounded like river stones. You can't make out most of it, but the melody is soothing, in the way only ancient things can be. Something about dew, something about barley, something about how the gods like a good song before they're asked for favors. Then comes the incense-pale smoke rising from carved stone burners, shaped like tiny ziggurats. One priest, eyes closed, fans the smoke over the crowd, using what appears to be a very fancy palm frond. Another shakes a rattle, another splashes a few drops of water into the bowl, and everyone gasps in unison, as if it were the climax of a well-loved play. A younger initiate leans over to whisper, "They say if the smoke curls eastward, rain will come before moonrise." You nod, watching the smoke drift lazily upward, and then slightly east. Everyone sees it. There's a murmur, heads nod. The tempo increases just slightly. A drum beat deepens. You get the sense that belief here isn't about certainty, it's about rhythm. Once you feel it, you belong to it. As the ritual ends, people step out of the circle one by one, not abruptly, but like waves retreating from the shore. There's no applause, no announcement, just a quiet collective breath as the final bell chimes. Once then, once again, then is still. You're handed a small cup of something sweet and spicy, fermented date water perhaps, or possibly just very enthusiastic fig juice. It warms your chest as you sip, and you feel a little more human again. You sit on a nearby step and watch the courtyard empty. One priest lingers carefully, re-centering the bowl and blowing gently on the incense to coax out one last curl of smoke. You ask if he really thinks it will rain tonight. He shrugs. Depends how generous a dad's feeling. Has this ritual ever not worked, you ask? Only every other time. He grins, then adds, but when it does work, it's always just enough to keep believing. Historians still argue whether Babylonian weather rituals were performative, psychological, or based on real observed correlations. But here in this city of soft superstition and sincere choreography, No one seems to mind the ambiguity. You ask about the song, the melody that clung to the walls, even after it stopped. He hums a line. The sky is a bowl. Tip it gently. The rain is a blessing, but never begged. You try to repeat it, stumble over the words, and he laughs. It takes time and bad weather. As you stand to leave, the breeze picks up. Not much, just enough to lift the corner of your robe and carry the last wisp of smoke toward the west. The priest watches it, eyes half-lidded. Interesting. What does that mean? Could mean storm, he says, or just the gods turning over in their sleep. You smile, he smiles back. Either way, I'd keep your sandals near your bed tonight. As you walk away, you hear someone begin the chant again. Soft, low, more of a hum than a song now. The courtyard fades behind you, but the rhythm stays in your step. And somewhere, in the shadows, a fig falls from a branch, hits the ground with a muted thud, and rolls gently eastward. You've made it to the quieter edges of the temple grounds now, where things get less ceremonial and more experimental. Here beneath the shade of date palms and half-repaired colonnades, you stumble onto something both unexpected and oddly charming. A makeshift performance area surrounded by curious locals, travelers, and priests with nothing better to do. Someone strikes a gong. Not the ominous, storm-summoning kind. This one sounds like someone tapping a soup pot with ambition. The crowd hushes. Then from behind a tattered curtain stitched with stars out, steps a trio of priests with brightly dyed sashes, and the air of people who once took themselves seriously and have since let that go. Welcome, says the one in the middle, arms wide, to the invocation of moisture. You can't tell if they're joking or not. The performance begins. It's a rain dance, but not the solemn kind you saw earlier. This one features exaggerated stomps, theatrical wiggles, and the occasional mid-spin yodel that might be divine, or might be from someone who just really loves attention. One priest waves a branch like a sword. Another balances a jug of water on his head. A third throws what appears to be flower petals at the sky while shouting, "Drink, O clouds, drink." It's mesmerizing and possibly improvised. You lean over to the man sitting beside you, an elder in a frayed tunic with a goat-shaped pendant, and ask, "Is this official?" He squints. "Oh yes, temple-sanctioned. Sort of." He pauses, then adds, "Also kinda karaoke." Sure enough, between each round of dance and gesture, someone steps forward to sing soft, droning melodies in honor of various weather deities. One is dedicated to Adad, the storm god. Another to Shala, his consort, known for her control of grain and rain alike. The lyrics go something like, "Let your winds be cool, your clouds be kind, let barley bloom and dust unwind." It's not catchy, but it is oddly soothing. After the fourth verse, someone from the audience joins in, then another, and suddenly you're in a kind of ancient, weather-themed sing-along. You're handed a reed instrument that may or may not have been tuned since last year. You blow into it anyway. It makes a sound somewhere between a duck and a resigned sigh. Everyone nods approvingly. You ask the priest nearest you how often they do this. Every time the clouds look indecisive, he says, which is to say, often. You watch as they reenact the myth of Adad's broken jug, a tale involving lost water, mistaken identities, and at least one angry cow. The choreography includes 3 priests running in a circle while shouting "oops" in Sumerian. A child in the crowd claps enthusiastically. You do too. Historians have long questioned the purpose of such rituals. Were they sincere prayers for rain, communal bonding exercises, elaborate ways to let off steam? During the hot season, probably yes to all of it. But no record quite captures the simple joy of seeing a dignified elder try to summon precipitation by doing what can only be described as a spiritual wiggle. The ritual ends with the raising of a silver bowl filled with river water and sprinkled with sesame seeds. Everyone goes quiet. The lead priest lifts the bowl and intones, "O rain, we danced, we sang. We made fools of ourselves for your affection. Let it be enough." He pours the water gently onto the dusty earth. It hisses softly, vanishes. Silence. Then a single drop of rain lands on someone's nose. The crowd erupts. Not in cheers, this is Babylon after all, but in deeply satisfied nods and humble acknowledgments of divine attention. You feel a sprinkle on your arm, then another. It's not a downpour, not yet, but something in the air has shifted. The clouds above are darker now, heavier, considering their options. As the crowd disperses, a woman beside you murmurs, "Well, either the gods are listening or someone finally fixed that canal mist valve." You chuckle. Does it matter? She shakes her head. Not really. Either way, my roof's going to leak. You walk slowly back toward the temple steps, the rhythm of the chants and dances still thrumming faintly in your bones. The rain continues in soft, uncertain taps, testing the earth, asking permission to stay. You stop beneath an archway and look out over the city. Babylon glistens now just a little as droplets catch the last light of the day and turn rooftops into shimmering mosaics. Somewhere in the distance, someone starts singing again. This time you recognize the tune, and you realize whether or not it rained because of the dance people believed it did. And that might be the real forecast. You linger under the archway for a while, watching the scattered rain drift down in lazy drops, like the sky is practicing before committing to a full performance. The stones around you darken slowly, one patch at a time, and a few puddles form in the shallow grooves of the plaza. It's not quite a storm, not yet, but it's a promise, and promises, as you've learned, carry weight in Babylon. Your path winds back toward the temple's inner court, but this time you're not heading toward priests or apprentices. You're following the faint buzz of whispered gossip and the occasional burst of laughter, unmistakable signs that palace messengers are near. Not the royal ones with their polished sandals and annoyed expressions. These are the junior ones, the page boys and scroll carriers, the ones who hear everything and forget nothing. They're clustered near a side gate under a small canopy draped in blue linen. One of them notices you and waves you over, clearly pleased to have someone new to impress. "You heard about the king, right?" he says, skipping introductions entirely. You shake your head. "Ah," he grins. "Then sit down. You're going to love this." You find a spot on a nearby bench, and the story begins. It's about a recent festival, something to do with trade winds and new barley. A public celebration had been planned, feasting, dancing, one of those giant sky banners that never quite stay inflated. But the forecast, a sheep liver reading, had warned of possible showers with unpredictable enthusiasm. Naturally, the high priest advised caution. "Light robes, but bring a cloak," he'd told the king. The king, in his infinite confidence, dismissed the warning. "The gods love me," he reportedly said. "Why would they ruin my parade, cue the rain? Not just a drizzle, but a full-tilt theatrical downpour. The sort of storm that makes you question every architectural decision involving open courtyards and decorative fountains." The king's chariot got stuck in the mud. His gold-threaded robe shrank 2 sizes. The crown slipped, and one of the doves released for ceremonial effect, flew directly into a brazier, and the best part, the messenger leans in. No one brought the royal umbrella. Gasps from the group. One apprentice bites his knuckle, trying not to laugh. The priest who made the forecast, another chimes in. Reassigned. Where do you ask? They exchange glances. Sheep duty. Apparently this isn't just a joke. In Babylon, being sent back to the sheep pen is the polite equivalent of being told to go read clouds until you learn some humility. Historians might call this an overreaction. But here, where divine mood swings and weather mishaps share equal billing, it's simply cause and effect. You fail the forecast, you join the livestock. The messenger continues pulling out a scroll he definitely wasn't supposed to show you. This, he says proudly, is the backup forecast. Written the night before, never shown to the king. Look what it says. He unrolls it, pointing to a line halfway down possible divine sulk. Recommend postponement. You blink, divine sulk. He nods. That's official language. Means someone upstairs is in a mood. You study the handwriting, neat, careful tense. Someone had wanted to warn him, but not too forcefully. Babylonian politics, even in clay, is all about plausible deniability. The rain lightens, fading into a mist that blurs the edges of everything, the columns, the benches, the wide eyes of the messenger, as he rolls up the scroll again with a conspiratorial grin. He pats your shoulder. Just remember, if you ever make a forecast here, never sound certain. The gods hate that. You wander back through the courtyard, mulling it over. Certainty is dangerous. Humility keeps your sandals dry, or at least keeps you from scrubbing mud off sheep for a month. As you pass a shallow fountain, you catch sight of a few young priests mimicking the king's soaked parade entrance. One pretends to trip in imaginary mud. Another improvises a speech to the gods about his spirit being dampened and also his socks. You keep walking. There's something oddly comforting in the absurdity of it all, that the highest man in the city can be brought low by a wayward cloud. That divine communication filtered through liver folds and cloud streaks can still be undone by forgetting to pack a hooded cloak. And somewhere beyond the temple, above the sandstone rooftops and the winding canals, the sky grumbles softly just once, like a chuckle trying not to be heard. You follow the sound of footsteps now, soft, hurried, but rhythmic, like sandals on packed earth, moving with purpose. You trail them through an open-air corridor flanked by two guardian statues whose faces are worn smooth by time and sand. The corridor opens into a vaulted chamber where the scent of oil lamps and damp clay fills your lungs like memory. Here beneath hanging lanterns and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling is a sight that feels both humble and miraculous. Dozens, maybe hundreds of clay tablets. Not lined up neatly, no. They're bundled, stacked, slanted in leaning piles, shoved into alcoves, some broken, others still damp from yesterday's work. It's a mess, but the kind of mess that means people cared. You've stepped into Babylon's information highway. A priest wearing a sash stained with ink and heat exhaustion greets you without looking up. He's balancing two tablets while scribbling with his free hand. Forecast Exchange Depot, he mutters. Stay to the left. Don't lean on the archive wall. And for the love of a dad, don't knock over the wind charts. You're handed a fresh scroll to carry, apparently destined for Tablet Cluster D. It's heavier than you expected. Not emotionally. Physically. The thing is, nearly the width of a dinner plate and covered in tiny, painstaking cuneiform. At the top you spot the title, Wind Observations and Sheep-Born Omens from the Third Temple Moon. You clutch it like it might crack open and reveal the secrets of the cosmos. The depot is alive with movement. Apprentices dart between shelves, tripping over their own robes. Scribes shout to one another across stone desks, using phrases like divinely confused air current, and he didn't really say it was going to drizzle, did he? You arrive at tablet cluster D, which is more a glorified niche in the wall than anything else, and hand off your scroll to a man who sniffs it before reading. He nods. Not damp. Good. That means Nipper's courier finally started using roofed satchels. You blink. This came from Nipper. He nods again. Rain report. Confirmation of our fog pattern. If it aligns with what came from we might have a trend. It turns out the cities exchange their forecasts regularly, like divine peer review. If Babylon sees dark clouds, and Nippur sees goat twitching, and reports low liver tension, it could mean a real pattern. Or just 3 bad days. Either way, they want documentation. He shows you a map, a large clay slab with faint marks scratched across it, each one representing a city-state, a forecast, a date. Strings are stretched between the clay pins, creating a lattice of weather whispers. You spot one stretch that connects Babylon, Sippar, and Larsa. That line, the priest says. All 3 predicted northern heat burst last season. Was it right, you ask? He frowns. Well, yes, but only after a correction from Kish involving a rogue sheep. A rogue sheep. He elaborates. Apparently one liver appeared to show clear skies, but the sheep had been fed a heavy diet of onions. It caused liver discoloration. The misreading led to a 3-day celebration in advance of a storm so bad it knocked down half a vineyard. The priest shrugs. Lesson learned. No more onion-fed forecasts. Historians still discuss how seriously these networks were taken. Some think they were administrative formalities. Others argue they show early attempts at collective meteorology. But you can see it now in the ink-smudged hands and weary eyes of the scribes. This is a place of shared anxiety. If you're going to be wrong about the weather, it's better to be wrong together. Another courier bursts into the room holding a dripping scroll and gasping. Eshnuna reports. Solar flicker. Everyone freezes. What kind of flicker, someone asks. The courier shakes his head. No details. Just that the sun dimmed for 5 heartbeats. Gasps. Pencils drop. Someone whispers the gods are testing the lamps. Within seconds, the room erupts into chaos. Tablets are pulled down past readings consulted. Someone grabs a sheep liver diagram and starts flipping it like it's a deck of cards. It's beautiful and completely incoherent. You back away slowly as the scholars dive into their storm of clay and guesswork. Outside, the rain has stopped. For now. You head back through the temple's western passage, marveling at how much trust is placed in the squiggly marks of ancient hands passed from city to city like gossip. Too important not to believe. A group of children passes you carrying a miniature tablet in a reed box. You ask where they're taking it. To Kish, one replies, "It's our weather note." You glance at the tiny inscription. It reads simply, "Wind smelled of figs. Pigeons disinterested. Sky unclear. Concise. Honest. Possibly prophetic." And as you watch them disappear down the road toward the river, courier boats, you can't help but smile. The gods may whisper in clouds and livers, but it's the people, scribes, messengers, and feather-dropping dreamers who carry the message forward. You wake from a short daydream, somewhere between the colonnades and the courtyards, the kind that sneaks up on you like a warm breeze one moment. You're blinking at the drizzle clinging to your eyelashes. The next, you're convinced The sky just winked. You stretch a little, stiff from all the watching, listening and gentle disbelief, and find yourself drawn toward a darkened archway at the edge of the complex. Inside, it's quiet. Not temple quiet where people murmur prayers and sandals shuffle in reverence. No, this is the hush of secrecy and of dust. You step in carefully, ducking beneath a low door frame carved with faded symbols. Some you recognize from liver diagrams, others entirely new. The room is dim, lit only by a few tiny lamps, guttering on stone brackets. Shelves line the walls, sagging under the weight of scrolls, tied with frayed reed strings and tablets so old they look like they've been fossilized into the architecture. And there at the center of the room, surrounded by scattered barley sacks, and what might once have been an altar, lies a scroll. Just one, unmarked, untouched, and as the old priest standing beside it explains, forgotten. He's got that look about him, the kind that says he's read too much and trusted too little. He nods politely as you approach, then turns back to the scroll, like it might whisper something if stared at long enough. This, he says quietly, was never meant to be found. You ask what it is. A forecast, he replies, written by a priest who saw something no one else did. He gestures for you to kneel beside him. The scroll is brittle but intact. The ink faded but legible, if barely. The script is strange, not quite the same as the temple records, sharper, angled, more like shorthand for someone in a hurry or someone trying not to be understood. You squint at the title, The Burning Cold. Catchy. The priest begins to read aloud slowly. On the third moon of the year of cracked wells, the liver of the sheep turned not to shadow but light. Its veins pulsed before the blade, and the gall sang. You pause, sang. He nods, dead serious. Some claimed it was just a knife whistle. But he, this priest, he believed the liver was alive in that moment. That the gods didn't just speak through signs. They inhabited the signs. Goosebumps, despite the warmth. The scroll goes on to describe a coming storm, not of rain or wind, but of sun, a heat so bright it would burn the stars from memory, followed by cold so deep it would crack the canals and steal the sky's voice. You lean back. That doesn't sound like weather. No, he agrees. It sounds like myth, or maybe prophecy, or maybe madness. Historians still debate the meaning of this scroll. It's referenced in only one other document found years later in Sippar, scrawled into the margin of a barley inventory list with a single note. Do not believe the Gaul's dream. You ask how it ended up here buried under sacks of grain. The priest shrugs. Maybe someone meant to burn it. Maybe someone meant to save it. Either way, it was forgotten. Until now. He unrolls the last section and reads aloud, voice trembling just slightly. Let it be recorded. Not to frighten, not to warn, but to witness that even when the wind does not blow, the gods are still watching. You sit in silence for a moment, unsure if the air just got colder or if your imagination's doing overtime. The priest gently re-rolls the scroll and tucks it back into its linen sheath, sliding it into a hollow in the wall that you now realize is shaped like an eye. You rise to your feet. Why show me this, you ask? He gives a faint smile. Because you've been watching all day. But now you've seen. You step outside, blinking as the light returns. The drizzle has stopped, but the air feels different, heavier, slower, as if the sky itself is digesting what was read aloud in that hidden room. You pass by two young priests, arguing over a broken weather tablet. That's not a fracture, one says. It's the gods blinking. No, it's just old, the other replies. Like you. They laugh and move on. You don't laugh. Because now the signs don't feel so playful. The dance, the chants, the forecasts, they're still rituals, still guesswork. But behind them all is the quiet hum of something ancient. Something that doesn't always want to be understood. You tilt your head upward. The clouds are gone, now swept clean. The sun peers through like a lantern behind stretched linen. And for the first time today, the sky isn't whispering, it's watching. Word count 1, EO 96. Awaiting continue. Section 17. You wander slowly now without a destination, just letting the ancient stone paths of Babylon lead you wherever they please. At this point, you're not so much walking as you are floating through the layers of sound, scent, and slowly falling light. The sky above is a pale blend of peach and silver, the air heavy with the distant scent of crushed figs and sun-warmed dust. Your sandals make soft noises on the path, rhythmic and slow like a heartbeat that's finally decided to relax. It's quieter here. You've drifted away from the bustling temple courts and frantic priestly debates. And now you find yourself entering the artisan's quarter, the side of Babylon where things are not read but made. The hum here is different. It's not the anxious mutterings of interpreters searching the sky for omens, but the contented clatter of hands shaping the world in clay reed, pigment, and wax. You follow the scent of fire-kilned earth and linseed oil to a wide sunken courtyard. There are wooden benches pushed haphazardly against dusty walls and a series of long tables lined with half-finished projects, reed baskets, sundials, carved ivory hairpins, and unexpectedly livers. Dozens of them, clay ones. You blink. You'd assumed you were done with the livers for the day, but clearly Babylon isn't finished with you yet. A man in a tunic, stained with slip and soot, looks up from behind a stack of reddish clay molds. He's squat, cheerful, and entirely unbothered by the fact that his fingers are currently bright orange, up to the second knuckle. "Ah," he says, grinning, "come to learn the real weather magic." You pause. "I thought that was happening in the temple." He snorts. "Those guys read livers. I make livers." You follow him as he walks to a side table. It's covered in a rainbow of drying sheep liver replicas, some flat and decorative, others chunky and full of mysterious grooves. One is painted with gold leaf, another has tiny lapis stones glued onto what you think might be the divine frost lobe. A third has a phrase carved into it, storm's probable attitude uncertain. "This," he says, proudly gesturing toward the chaotic collection, "is my shop. I call it the Do-It-Yourself Divination Depot, or just D3 if you're in a hurry." You laugh, which only encourages him. He pulls a cloth off a fresh block of clay and gestures for you to sit on the low bench beside him. "Let's make your very own weather-reading organ," he says. "No pressure. You'll only be judged by the gods." With a slightly theatrical flourish, he slaps the clay onto a slab of wood and begins shaping it. His fingers work fast, carving out the classic curve, the bulbous ends, the long, smooth underside where most of the divine indicators are allegedly found. He mutters to himself as he works, "Wind vein here, storm ridge there. Need a little more panic around the gall duct." You're handed a small stylus and invited to decorate. You begin cautiously, poking a gentle spiral into one end. The artisan leans over your shoulder and nods. "Ah, yes. That's classic misplaced optimism energy." You carve a few more lines, inventing symbols as you go. One looks like a fish with a thundercloud above it. Another is just a jagged line you claim means fog, but with feelings. I like your style, he says. Very emotionally unstable meteorology. It's all the rage this season. He pulls out a stamp and presses it gently into the side of your model. It leaves a tiny inscription, prognosis unclear. You glance around the courtyard. A few children nearby are making their own models, more blobs than livers, but full of joy. One insists her clay piece predicts candy rain. Another claims that if you spin his model 3 times and throw it in a pond, it guarantees a nap. You nod approvingly. That one might actually work. The artisan waves toward a shelf nearby. We even have deluxe kits, he says. Comes with 2 pre-scored livers, a decorative stylus, and a scroll of moderately useful phrases. You peek at the scroll. It includes options like rain likely, probably. Who can say, beware clouds that move like guilt? Dry air, moist regret. You ask him how long he's been doing this. Since I stopped pretending to be a priest, he replies. They told me my forecasts were too entertaining. I told them theirs were too predictable. He shrugs, tossing another lump of clay on the table. Look, the gods are important, sure, but sometimes you don't need divine permission to laugh at a bad forecast, or make a good one with a little flair. Historians still debate whether artisans like him were fringe figures or respected contributors to Babylon's weather culture. Some argue they made training tools for priesthood academies. Others say they were just entertainers with too much clay and not enough supervision. But here in this courtyard, under the gently darkening sky, you realize it doesn't matter. These livers, ridiculous as they are, carry something sacred to joy. Joy in crafting, in pretending, in poking gentle fun at the impossible task of knowing what tomorrow will bring. The artisan wraps your model in a cloth pouch and hands it to you. Here, he says, for your collection, or for the next time someone asks if you can see the future. You smile. What's the return policy if it's wrong? He shrugs. Blame the sheep. You step out of the courtyard as the sun dips behind the rooftops, casting the streets in honey-colored twilight. In your hand is a handmade clay liver, useless, inaccurate, and utterly perfect. And in your chest, something softer now, something lighter. Maybe it's not about getting the forecast right. Maybe it's about learning to dance in the unpredictability. And maybe that's what the gods have been trying to say all along. You carry the clay liver like a talisman, now wrapped neatly in its pouch, tucked under your arm like a private joke between you and the gods. Babylon is dimming, not just from the setting sun, but from the soft exhale of a city that's said all it needs to say for the day. Lanterns flicker to life one by one, their golden glow spilling down mud brick walls and illuminating puddles left by the brief, confused rain. You follow a side path between temple workshops, your feet crunching on scattered straw and broken bits of fired clay. Then from a small plaza just ahead, you hear something strange laughter. Not polite temple chuckles, real full-bodied laughter, the kind that tilts your head before you even know why. You turn the corner and find a group of villagers, apprentices, and a few off-duty priests seated around an older man standing on an overturned amphora. He's tall, wiry, with wild hair, and a tunic that doesn't quite match on either side. One foot is bare, the other wears a sandal made of woven fig bark. You instantly trust him. He raises a hand for silence, then proclaims in a booming voice, "You may trust the wind. You may trust the stars. But beware the goat that sneezes before breakfast." The crowd roars with approval. You ease into the back of the circle as he launches into what can only be described as a stand-up routine based entirely on making fun of weather forecasting. He tells of the time a priest mistook a beetle's shadow for an eclipse, the time a scroll was smudged by soup and predicted onion fog, the time a young apprentice confidently claimed a double-lobed liver meant emotional storms, and the high priest wept for 3 days. It's ridiculous. It's wonderful. It's, you laugh too and the old man notices you. Ah, he shouts. A newcomer, Ellis friend, do you divine with feathers, with livers, or with that ancient sacred tool known as guessing and hoping for the best? You raise your pouch, he bows deeply. Aha, a maker of clay prophecies. The most dangerous of all because you're too charming to be blamed when you're wrong. The crowd applauds. He leaps down and waves you forward. Come sit. Tonight's forecast will be delivered by democratic yelling. You take a seat on the fountain ledge as he unrolls a piece of bark parchment and clears his throat dramatically. Let the people declare what the signs say. Someone yells, "A frog croaked twice." Another shouts, "The wind knocked over my mother-in-law's cooking pot." A third offers, "My sheep walked in circles and refused to eat." He nods solemnly, after each one scribbling in exaggerated strokes. Conclusion. The gods are hungry, grumpy, and possibly in love. Expect mist. The laughter rings through the plaza like wind chimes. But underneath it all, there's something deeper shared experience. Everyone here has lived through Babylon's confusing, beautiful weather. Everyone has worried about crops, waited for rain, watched the sky like it might blink first. The man becomes quiet now. He folds the bark and tucks it into his robe. Truth is, he says, I've seen priests get it wrong. I've seen goats get it right. I've watched the stars blink and change their minds. He looks around and the crowd leans in. But the one thing I've never seen, he says softly, is a single person who didn't hope, who didn't look at the sky and wish it would be kind. He pauses. That's why we tell the stories. That's why we guess. That's why we make clay livers and dance like fools and argue about pigeons. He grins, because hope is what makes the forecast worth having. You glance up. The clouds are back again, faint and low, just visible under the first dusting of stars. The air smells of damp stone and wood smoke. It feels like the kind of night that can change your life if you're paying attention. Historians still argue whether these kinds of performances were tolerated by the priesthood or quietly discouraged. But they likely endured because people needed release, needed to laugh at the system while still living inside it. You hand the man your clay liver. He inspects it like a jeweler with a stolen gem. Very nice, he says. This dent here definitely a sign of late-night drizzle. And this little spiral emotional cloud cover. The audience nods, seriously, clearly impressed. He hands it back, bows again, and adds, "Congratulations. You've just made tomorrow at least 12% more interesting. You stay for a while longer listening to stories. A fish that predicted lightning by swimming backward, a goose that sat on the same rooftop for 40 days. A boy who swore he could hear clouds whispering when he lay very still. Eventually the group disperses. People drift off into the night like embers from a fire, content connected, comforted. You stand, stretch, and feel the slight tug of fatigue in your limbs, but also something lighter in your chest, like laughter has made room for a rest. As you walk back toward the temple housing, a breeze brushes your face. Not strong, just enough to remind you that the sky is still awake, still listening, still deciding. You walk slowly now, following the breeze as it curls between temple columns and slips around sleeping goats. The city has quieted, but not completely. There are still pockets of life, faint conversations over lantern light, a distant splash from a bathhouse, the creak of cartwheels being locked into place for the night. Babylon doesn't sleep so much as it gently pauses between breaths. You pass a mural on the wall, half faded but still legible. It shows a priest lifting a sheep liver to the sky while a crowd looks on in awe. But beneath the priest, carved with equal reverence, is a man holding a clay tablet and squinting at a feather. The caption beneath reads, "To listen is divine, to guess is human." And somehow that feels like the perfect summary of everything you've seen. The last stop on your quiet journey tonight is the temple's inner archive, a long, cool room lined with dusty timelines, thick scrolls, and the clay-stamped record of Babylon's forecasting tradition. A scribe lets you in with a wave too tired to care who you are anymore, and you find yourself wandering through the rows. One wall longer than the others is etched from floor to ceiling with the official history of Babylon's weather divination methods. You trace it with your fingers, reading from right to left. At the beginning, the early days of sacrifice and simple signs, liver shape, gall texture, color shifts. Then come the feathers, the winds, the cloud scrolls. The more years pass, the more tools appear. Bird migration charts, canal overflow markers, even tidal patterns linked to moon readings, though Babylon's nowhere near the sea. But then something happens. A slow, visible decline. Not in effort, but in belief. You start to see additions that feel hesitant, scribbled amendments, multiple interpretations listed for the same liver marking. One entry from about 70 years ago simply reads, "Too smooth. Forecast uncertain. Sky said nothing." You run your fingers across a patch labeled "Last Royal Reading marked just 20 years prior." The liver had been flawless, no spots, no notches, nothing. It was declared a good omen. But 2 days later, a sandstorm rolled in so violently it buried the merchant quarter and forced the king to relocate to a backup palace across the canal. The priests scrambled. Some claimed the smooth liver had masked the storm. Others argued the reader had been too optimistic. One particularly bold apprentice suggested that maybe the gods didn't use sheep anymore. He was promptly reassigned to counting beetles in temple granaries. You notice how over time the liver models stopped evolving. The forecasts grew vaguer, and more space on the tablets was devoted to rituals, songs, dances, incense recipes, things to appease the gods rather than interpret them. The scribe walks by and catches your thoughtful look. Still trying to predict the sky, he asks, "Just reading how everyone else did you reply?" He chuckles. Some still do, but not like before. He pulls a scroll from a shelf and lays it flat on the nearest table. It's newer than the others, still crisp. The title, "Transition of Method, Sky Signs to Practical Observations." "See this line," he says, pointing to a section halfway down. "That's when we started trusting barometric pressure over bile ducts." You nod slowly. It's the turning point, the shift from divine interpretation to observation-based forecasting. Not a rejection of the old ways exactly, just a quiet walking away. The scribe rolls it back up and replaces it carefully. You can't blame them, he adds. After enough missed forecasts, people stop listening. Or worse, they stop asking. You glance at a cracked tablet nearby. It reads simply "liver dry, sky dry, people tired." There's something melancholic about it. Not tragic exactly, just gently sad. Like an old song nobody sings anymore, but everyone still hums when no one's looking. Historians often argue over when Babylon stopped truly believing in liver omens. Some point to that disastrous sandstorm, others to the increase in droughts that no forecast could predict. Some say it never fully stopped, just faded into custom, something people do out of habit, like lighting a lamp or knocking on wood. But walking these rows, you can feel the fading yourself. The walls don't lie. The last few entries are practically blank. You turn a corner and find a small plaque on the wall, a modern edition etched in cleaner lines. Here ends the record of the old ways. Not because they failed, but because we stopped listening with wonder. You sit on the bench beneath it, your clay pouch resting on your lap. All day you followed the signs, literal and symbolic. You've watched as people tried everything: blood stars, feathers, jokes, dances, whispers, and arguments. And now in this still room, it feels like the whole city has exhaled. Like all of Babylon is waiting to see if you'll ask the same question they did for centuries. What's coming next? You don't know. But for the first time today, that doesn't bother you. You rise, nod to the scribe, and step back into the night. Outside, the wind has changed again. You smile, because maybe the livers really did know something. Maybe they never needed to be right. Maybe their only job was to keep you curious, and that was always enough. You step out of the archive into a night that feels fuller somehow. The rain has long since passed, but its ghost lingers in the smell of damp stone and petrichor rising from the temple courtyards. The air is cool, now touched with just enough breeze to remind you that Babylon never truly sleeps. It only lowers its voice. You walk slowly through the temple corridors, one last time past empty chambers and extinguished lamps. Every corner you turn feels like the soft closing of a chapter. A clay tablet left on a bench, a feather caught in a crack between stones, a puddle that reflects the stars like a forgotten mirror. The city is humming a lullaby in its own way, and you're listening. Eventually you find yourself back where you started, at the courtyard steps, where the very first sheep of the day had been led to its fate. The altar is quiet, now cleared and scrubbed. The bowls have been stacked. The priests have retired to their chambers or slipped into the night for one last glance at the sky. But one figure remains, the high priest. He's standing with his back to you, robes loose and wind blown, staring into the sky like he's trying to memorize it. You approach quietly, and he doesn't turn, but he speaks, voice low and slow. It didn't rain when it should have. It rained when no one asked for it. The wind argued with the feathers, and the stars blinked out of order. He finally turns to you, and yet somehow we made it through. You stand beside him in silence, watching the stars. They're brighter now. Or maybe your eyes have simply adjusted. He continues. We used to think the gods would tell us everything, if only we listened hard enough, read carefully enough. But maybe, he sighs, maybe the gods just want us to learn to live with not knowing. He gestures toward the heavens. You can spend your whole life trying to decode the sky, or you can sit beneath it and breathe. A pause. Then he chuckles softly. You've done well today. You asked questions. You paid attention. That's more than most. More than many priests even. He reaches into his robe and presses a small clay token into your palm. It's smooth and round with a spiral etched into its center. The same spiral you'd carved into your own practice liver earlier in the day. Keep this, he says. Not for answers, for reminders. He walks away without another word, disappearing between the pillars, like a shadow returning to its place. You hold the token tightly. Somewhere, a wind chime rings gently. You leave the temple and make your way down the ziggurat steps one by one. Below, the city is almost completely still. Smoke trails rise like fading thoughts from distant rooftops. The moon sits low, full, and fat, resting against the night as if it too is tired. As you cross a small footbridge over a trickling canal, you stop for a moment and look back. The temple rises above you, dark now, but not silent. You can feel it breathing. You can feel all of Babylon breathing. In the distance, a rooster crows, once much too early. You smile. Maybe it knows something. Maybe it doesn't. And maybe that's okay. You take one more deep breath, pocket your token, and walk slowly toward the edge of the city, where the fields wait in silence. And the wind carries stories no one will ever write down. The road beneath your feet softens into dust. The night around you stretches long and quiet, wrapping you gently in its cool hands. The last sounds of the city are distant now, a fading lullaby, a closing door, the soft trickle of water over stone. You feel your body grow heavier with each step, like it's sinking slowly into something warm, safe and still. Overhead, the stars pulse like slow breath, not hurried, not urgent, just there, just enough. The moonlight brushes your shoulders, your hands, your face, like it's tucking you in. The air smells of fig leaves and rain. The wind is no longer curious. It's calm now, settled. You pass by a field where the barley leans in the breeze. No one's watching, no one's predicting, and yet everything moves with rhythm, with purpose, with peace. You find a patch of ground by a sleeping tree and sit, then lie back, then close your eyes. There's nothing more to see. You've walked with the priests, held the clay, listened to the stars, and now all that remains is this moment, this breath, this hush. The sky above no longer whispers, it rests. So do you. You don't need a liver to know what comes next. Just sleep.